There's a book that will make you distrust your own first thought. It's called Thinking, Fast and Slow, written by a psychologist named Daniel Kahneman, a man who somehow won a Nobel Prize in economics without ever taking an economics class. That should tell you something about what's coming, because what he discovered isn't really about money. It's about the two people living inside your head, making your decisions for you. And most of the time, you don't even know which one is in charge. It's 8:47 on a Monday morning. You're still holding your coffee, haven't even sat down properly when the email lands. Subject line, we need to talk about your report today. Your stomach drops before you've even read the second sentence. And here's the strange part. You don't decide what happens next. Your fingers just start moving. You're typing a reply that's a little too sharp, a little too fast, a little too defensive, and you hit send before your brain has caught up with your hands. 20 minutes later, staring at your screen, you read it again, and you wince. That's not what you meant to say. That's not even close to how you wanted to handle it. So what happened in those 40 seconds between opening the email and hitting send? You didn't think. Not really. Something else did the thinking for you. If that feels familiar, if you've ever sent the text, made the purchase, or said the thing you regretted 5 minutes later, you're not impulsive. You're not weak-willed. You're dealing with something Kahneman spent his whole career studying, the fact that you don't have one mind. You have two. And once you know which one is driving at any given moment, something shifts. You stop being surprised by your own reactions. You start catching yourself mid-fall. That single skill, knowing who's deciding, is the difference between a life that happens to you and a life you actually run. Bodhi Sectian 1, the two people in your head. Picture two roommates sharing the same skull. The first one never sleeps. It's fast, confident, and it never says, I don't know. Show it a face, and it instantly reads angry or friendly. Show it 2 + 2, and the answer's just there. No work required. Kahneman calls this one system one, but let's just call it the reflex. The second roommate is slower, lazier, honestly. It only wakes up when something gets hard, long division, a tough decision, a complicated argument. It checks the math. It asks, wait, is that actually true? That's system 2. Call it the reasoner. Here's the twist most people never learn. The reflex is running the show almost all day, every day. Walking, driving a familiar route, reading a friend's tone of voice. The reflex handles it, and honestly, it's brilliant at it. You'd be exhausted if the reasoner had to approve every step you take. But the reflex has one dangerous habit. It doesn't know the difference between this is simple and this just feels simple. It hijacks decisions it was never built to handle, especially the emotional ones. That email on Monday morning? The reflex smelled a threat, and it fired back before the reasoner even got out of bed. So the real question isn't, how do I think better? It's how do I notice, in the moment, which roommate has the wheel? And that starts with catching the reflex's favorite trick, the one it pulls almost every single time you meet someone new. Bodhi Sectian 2, the story your brain writes from nothing. You're scrolling a dating profile, or reading a coworker's Slack bio, or sitting across from someone in a job interview. 2 words land, confident and intense. And just like that, before you've learned anything real about this person, your brain has already built an entire character. Successful, probably a little cold, maybe hard to work with. You didn't gather that information. You invented it in about half a second from almost nothing. This is what Kahneman calls WYSIATI. What you see is all there is. The reflex doesn't wait for complete information. It can't stand not knowing, so it grabs whatever scraps are in front of it and builds a full, confident story around them. Not a maybe. A story it believes completely. And here's why this matters more than it sounds like it should. This is the exact mechanism behind snap judgments about people. One bad meeting that ends a friendship. One typo that makes you write someone off as careless. The reflex isn't lying to you on purpose. It genuinely doesn't know it's guessing. The fix isn't gather more data. You'll never have all the data. The fix is smaller and stranger. Just asking yourself, what am I assuming that I haven't actually confirmed? That one sentence is enough to wake the reasoner up. But WYSIATI isn't the only trick. Sometimes the reflex doesn't invent a story from nothing. It gets handed a number, and it can't let go of it. Bodhi Sectian 3, the number that won't leave your head. You're at a car dealership. The sticker says $34,000. You know, sticker prices are inflated. Everybody knows that. So you negotiate hard, and you walk out feeling great about knocking it down to $31,000. Except the car was never worth more than $28,000. That $34,000 number did something to you the moment you saw it. It became an anchor, a mental starting point your brain quietly measures everything else against. You weren't negotiating from, what's this actually worth? You were negotiating from, how far can I get from that first number? And the dealership knew that before you ever walked in. This is why the first salary number mentioned in an interview shapes the entire negotiation. Why a restaurant menu puts one absurdly expensive dish at the top, just so every other price looks reasonable next to it. The reflex isn't calculating value. It's measuring distance from whatever number it saw first. And it will defend that distance like it's a fact. Once you know anchors exist, you start spotting them everywhere. The original price crossed out on a sale tag, the first offer in any negotiation, even the first opinion someone shares in a group conversation before you formed your own. And once you can see the anchor, you can finally ask the only question that matters. Not, is this better than the first number, but what is this actually worth on its own? Numbers aren't the only thing that quietly warps your judgment, though. Sometimes it's not a figure you saw, it's a feeling you can't shake. Bodhisectian 4, why the rare thing feels common. Your friend posts about a flight delay that turned into an 8-hour nightmare. 2 days later, you're booking a trip, and something in you just doesn't want to fly. You look at driving instead. It feels safer, more in your control. It isn't. Statistically, the drive is far riskier than the flight. But statistics don't run through your head at 11 p.m. while you're scrolling flight options. A vivid story does. This is the availability heuristic. Your brain doesn't judge how likely something is. It judges how easily an example comes to mind. A dramatic story, a recent headline, a friend's bad experience. These all feel more available than a boring statistic, so your reflex quietly treats them as more probable, even when the math says the opposite. It's why people fear shark attacks more than car accidents. Why one viral scam story makes you suspicious of every stranger for a week. Why a single bad review can outweigh 200 good ones in your mind. The vivid thing isn't the common thing. It just feels that way, because it's the one your brain can picture. Once you notice this pattern, you get to ask a much better question before making a decision driven by fear or excitement. Am I reacting to the odds, or to a story that happens to be stuck in my head? And that question matters most in the one place people almost never apply it. The decisions where walking away should be easy, but somehow never is. Bodhisectian 5, why you can't just walk away. You know the job isn't right anymore. You know the relationship stopped growing a while ago. You know the investment is bleeding slowly. Everyone around you can see it. You can see it too. So why don't you leave? Kahneman's answer is one of the most important ideas in the whole book. Losses hurt roughly twice as much as an equivalent gain feels good. Losing $100 doesn't feel like the opposite of finding $100. It feels worse, much worse. And that single asymmetry is enough to trap you. Leaving the job means losing the security, the routine, the identity you built there. Even if what you'd gain somewhere else is genuinely bigger, your reflex doesn't weigh it evenly. It screams about the loss and stays almost silent about the gain. So you stay. Not because staying is smart, because leaving feels like it costs more than it actually does. This is loss aversion, and it's quietly running more of your life than you'd like to admit. The subscription you never cancel, the stuff you can't throw out, the plan you keep funding even after it's clearly failed, just because quitting now would mean admitting the loss is real. The way out isn't forcing yourself to be brave. It's asking a colder, simpler question. If I didn't already have this, if I were choosing fresh, today, would I choose it now? If the honest answer is no, the thing you're afraid of losing was never really worth keeping. So think back to Monday morning, the email. The 40 seconds between reading it and hitting send. You know now what was actually happening in that gap. Your reflex read a threat, built a story out of 2 sentences, and fired back before the reasoner even opened its eyes. That's not a character flaw. That's just how the mind works. Fast first, careful second, if at all. But now you know there are 2 of you in there. And the moment you can name which one is driving, you get something you didn't have before, a pause. A half second of space between the feeling and the reaction. That space is where every good decision you'll ever make actually lives. So here's the one thing to try today. The next time you feel that fast, hot reaction rising to a message, a price, a decision, just stop for 10 seconds and ask, is this the reflex talking? Or have I actually thought this through? That's it. That's the whole practice. If this helped you see your own mind a little more clearly, subscribe. There's a lot more of your own thinking left to uncover.